You have 30 seconds to tell me why you stole my life, Jeremiah. That's what I said when he walked into my living room, still wearing that expensive cologne his wife bought him for his birthday. His mouth opened, then shut again, like a boy caught in a lie he hadn't rehearsed well enough. For the first time in my life, my son had nothing to say. It's strange how quiet betrayal sounds. You expect thunder, shouting, something violent to match the weight in your chest. But it was just me, the ticking of the old clock, and the sound of his breathing. He said, "Mama, it's not what you think." But it was exactly what I thought. The numbers on that bank screen hadn't lied. 37 years of saving gone. The long nights washing dishes in that diner gone. The money I'd set aside for my burial gone. Every sacrifice turned into a blank balance, and a polite apology from a teller who couldn't meet my eyes. I used to believe that love, especially a mother's love, could fix anything. But love doesn't protect you from your own child. Karma does. Justice does. And sometimes silence does. Hello, my beautiful story family. Before we dive deeper into my incredible story, a tale of betrayal, hidden fortune, and an unthinkable fight for justice, I'd like to know, where are you watching from today? Drop your city in the comments. And honestly, if this story touches you the way I think it will, may want to subscribe to this channel because what happens next will leave you speechless. My name is Regina Wallace, and this is the story of how I went from a woman who worked herself into the ground for her son, to the woman who made him understand what it costs to betray someone who gave you everything. But let me start from the beginning. I was 23 when I learned what it meant to lose everything. My husband, Raymond, had caught a cold that turned into pneumonia faster than doctors could keep up. One minute we were talking about baby names. The next I was standing in a hospital hallway with a chart I couldn't afford to read. 7 months pregnant, no job, no home, and nowhere to go but forward. People think strength feels like fire. It doesn't. It feels like hunger, exhaustion, and stubbornness refusing to die. I told myself that if I could survive that winter, my child would never know the taste of desperation. I didn't have a degree. I didn't have family. But I had hands that could work and a promise that could keep me alive. So I worked. Floors, dishes, clothes, anything that paid. I came home every night smelling like bleach and oil, my body aching so bad I'd cry in silence so the baby wouldn't feel my sadness. And when Jeremiah was born, I looked at his tiny face and told him, "You'll never owe the world what I owed it. I'll make sure of that." I did. For 30 years, I made sure of it. He was my purpose. Every dollar I earned had his name on it. Every ache in my back was proof I'd kept him safe. He got new shoes when I didn't buy new clothes. He went on school trips I couldn't afford to dream about. He never once saw me break down, though I did, often when he was asleep. Jeremiah grew up believing stability was his birthright. I never corrected him. I thought that was love. I thought protecting him from the truth of how hard life could be was what good mothers did. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was teaching him the wrong kind of love. One that takes without gratitude. The first time I met Serena, she looked at my house like she was being punished. I was wearing my old church dress, the one I'd had for years, and she had on a gold bracelet that cost more than my week's groceries. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Jeremiah told me you're such a strong woman," she said. "You must be so proud." I smiled back, because mothers don't start wars with their children's wives. But something inside me tightened. The way she held his arm, the way he looked at her like she was something fragile and expensive. It was the same look I used to give him when he was a baby. I realized then, I wasn't his center anymore. Still, I told myself it was fine. That's what love does. It changes form. It grows with them. It learns to let go. So when he said, "Mama, let me help manage your finances," I felt this strange warmth. Like maybe, after all these years, my son finally saw me as someone worth taking care of. I signed the papers without reading much. I trusted him. I always trusted him. That's the cruel thing about betrayal. It only hurts when it comes from someone you believed never would. The morning I found out, it was raining. I'd gone to the bank because I needed money for my arthritis medication. The teller, a young woman who'd always been kind, kept glancing at her screen and then back at me. "Ma'am, I'm sorry," she said softly, "but your balance shows 0. I remember blinking, thinking maybe she meant the wrong account. I even laughed, a small, confused sound. "That can't be right," I said. "Check again." She did. The result didn't change. I walked home without feeling my feet. Everything around me blurred. Cars, voices, the sound of rain. I kept hearing Raymond's voice in my head telling me, "People can take everything, Gina, but they can't take your will." When Jeremiah opened the door, he looked irritated, not guilty. That was when I knew. He'd already decided it wasn't wrong. He'd already told himself a story that made it okay. "Mama, you don't have to worry about money anymore," he said, smiling like he was giving me a gift. "Serena's handling everything now. She's better with finances." I stared at him, searching for the boy who used to cry when I came home late, who used to bring me dandelions from the yard because he thought they were flowers. But all I saw was a man who'd learned comfort too easily. Behind him, Serena smirked. Her hand rested on his shoulder like she owned him. Maybe she did. She said, "You'll thank us later, Regina. This is for your own good." That's when I stopped listening. Something inside me went quiet. Not broken, not defeated, just quiet. The kind of silence that builds mountains or burns them down. He mistook that silence for surrender. He had no idea that while he was learning how to take, I'd spent decades learning how to survive. I know what people think of women like me. Widows who work their whole lives just to stay afloat. They think we're soft, grateful, easy to fool. But I learned a long time ago. The quieter a woman becomes, the more dangerous she is. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just said, "All right, baby. If you think that's best." He looked relieved. Serena smiled. They left. I closed the door, sat down in my old armchair, and took a deep breath. For the first time in years, I didn't feel tired. I felt awake. The clock ticked on. Outside, the rain stopped. I thought about every dollar I'd ever earned. Every night I'd cried in silence so Jeremiah wouldn't see my pain. Every dream I'd buried under the weight of responsibility. And then I thought, maybe it's time those dreams lived again. My son thought he'd taken everything from me. He didn't know he'd only freed me from pretending he was still the boy I raised. Because what comes next, that's not about revenge. It's about balance. And balance always finds its way home. I wasn't born strong. I became strong because weakness never gave me a choice. People talk about courage like it's some shining thing. But real courage smells like sweat and soap, like the inside of a bus at 2 a.m. when you're coming home from your second job, praying your child's still asleep. For years, I lived that life. And for years, Jeremiah was my reason to keep breathing through it. When he was little, he used to wait by the window every night, holding his blanket, fighting sleep. The moment I opened the door, he'd run straight into my arms. "You came back," he'd whisper. And I'd say, "Always." That word became my truth. Always. Always working. Always giving. Always loving. Always believing. When you spend your life building someone else's world, you forget you ever had your own. Jeremiah was smart. The kind of smart that gets teachers talking in hallways and neighbors calling him that bright Wallace boy. He had my husband's smile and my stubbornness. I remember saving for months just to buy him a computer when he was 12, because he said he wanted to be an engineer. He'd sit at that old desk for hours, building little models, typing things I couldn't understand. And I'd stand at the door proud. Tired but proud. Every time he achieved something, I told myself it's worth it. When he graduated from college, the first Wallace to ever walk across a stage in a cap and gown, I cried so hard I couldn't see the camera screen. I thought, this is what sacrifice is for. He hugged me afterward and said, "You did it, Mama." And I believed him. Then came the job, the apartment, the girlfriend. Serena. The first time I heard her name, he sounded excited in a way I hadn't heard since he was a kid. "She's ambitious, Mama," he said. "She makes me feel like I can do more." I wanted to like her before I met her. I really did. But when she walked into my house that first Sunday, she looked around like she was stepping into a museum that hadn't been dusted in years. She smiled politely and offered to bring takeout next time. I told her I'd already cooked. She said, "Oh, how traditional." That word stayed with me, traditional, like it was something outdated, something that didn't belong in the life she imagined for them. Still, I told myself she was just nervous, that maybe she'd warm up. But over time, her words started cutting in small, careful ways. "Jeremiah, you shouldn't lift that. You'll hurt your back. Regina, maybe you should let the younger folks handle things. You've done so much, it's time to rest." It sounded like kindness, but it was really a slow erasing. Every word chipped away at the version of me my son used to look up to. I started noticing changes in Jeremiah, too. He stopped coming by as often. When he did, his eyes were on his phone more than on me. The warmth in his voice turned polite. He'd say things like, "You should move closer to us," or "Serena's been looking into retirement homes. Just options, nothing serious." Retirement homes. That was the first time I realized he saw me as someone who needed managing, not someone who had survived worse than both of them put together. One night, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table with my checkbook, looking at the neat little rows of numbers I'd written over the years. Rent, utilities, groceries, savings. Each number told a story, a piece of my life traded for another person's comfort. I thought of how many times I'd skipped meals to keep that savings growing. That money wasn't just for me. It was my proof that all those sacrifices meant something. So when Jeremiah offered to help handle it, it felt like love wearing a new face, care disguised as responsibility. I didn't know it was the first sign of something darker. The day I handed over access to my account, we were sitting in my living room. He had his laptop open, smiling, explaining how he'd make sure my bills were paid automatically, so I wouldn't have to worry. He talked about investments, about better returns, about convenience. All I heard was my boy taking care of me. "Sign here, Mama," he said, turning the screen toward me. "It's just for authorization." I signed. He kissed my forehead before he left. "You raised me right," he said. I didn't know that would be the last time those words would mean what they used to. Weeks passed quietly. He called less. Serena texted me sometimes, short, clipped messages that sounded like obligations. "Hope you're doing well, Regina. Jeremiah's busy with work, but sends love." One Saturday, I decided to surprise them with dinner. I cooked his favorite meal, baked chicken with mashed potatoes and gravy, the kind he used to ask for every birthday. I packed everything neatly and took a cab to their house. When I arrived, the music inside was loud. I rang the bell twice before Serena opened the door. Her smile froze when she saw me standing there with a tray in my hands. "Oh," she said. "You didn't call." "I wanted to surprise you," I said. She hesitated, glancing behind her. "Now's not really a good time. We have company." I saw movement inside. People laughing, glasses clinking. I recognized none of them. Jeremiah appeared behind her, a glass in his hand. "Mama, what are you doing here?" "I brought dinner," I said softly. He sighed. "You should have told us first. We're having people over, work friends." Serena added, "It's a formal dinner, Regina. But thank you, really." She reached for the tray, not to take it, just to push it gently back toward me. The smell of the food mixed with the expensive perfume wafting from inside. My hands shook slightly as I steadied the tray. "I'll just leave this here then," I said. But Jeremiah didn't let me. "No, Mama. Take it home. We'll visit tomorrow." Tomorrow never came. That was the first time I felt something crack. It wasn't rage, not yet. Just a hollow sound inside me where pride used to live. I walked home that night slower than usual. The tray felt heavier than it should have. When I got inside, I placed it on the table untouched. The silence in the house was loud. I sat down and stared at the food until it went cold. That's when I realized, love without respect is just charity. And I wasn't anyone's charity. A month later, he called. His tone was light, casual, like nothing had happened. "Mama," he said, "Serena and I are thinking of moving your account to a joint management system. It's more secure. Everything will be in one place." I hesitated. "You already have access, baby." "I know, but this is just an update," he said. "You'll still see everything. I just need you to confirm it with the bank." I remember asking, "You're sure this is safe?" He laughed softly. "You raised a smart man, didn't you? Trust me." So I did. Again, looking back, I see the small things I ignored. The way Serena would glance at him when money came up. The way he'd change the subject when I asked about his new business venture. The way my birthday card from them that year came with no signature, just from us. It's funny how betrayal doesn't announce itself. It comes dressed as routine. It sounds like love. It uses your own voice to convince you everything's fine. The next time I saw him was at church. I'd joined the choir years ago, though my voice wasn't what it used to be. After the service, he and Serena came up to me, smiling wide for the congregation. "People keep saying how lucky we are," Serena said, gripping his arm. "Your son's so successful. You must be proud." I smiled politely. "I am. I always was." But something in me was starting to dim. I could feel it, the slow fading of trust like a light losing power. That same week, I got a letter from the utility company saying my auto payments had stopped. I called the bank, confused. The teller said my account had been restructured and referred me to my account manager. I didn't have one. When I asked who was listed, she said a name I recognized too well, Serena Whitman. That was the first betrayal. Quiet, legal, irreversible. I hung up the phone, sat at the table, and stared at the wall. I thought of all the nights I'd spent working so Jeremiah could sleep peacefully. I thought of the years I'd prayed for him, fed him, protected him. And now, my son's wife was managing the money I'd bled for. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't even speak. I just sat in silence until morning. I think that was the moment I began to change. Because when the world takes something from you, you either spend your life mourning it, or you start rebuilding without telling anyone. When Jeremiah came by a few days later, I acted normal. I made coffee. I smiled. He sat across from me, relaxed, confident, tapping away at his phone. "Everything okay, Mama?" he asked. "Fine," I said. "Just checking on things." He nodded, not really listening. "Serena's setting up some tax paperwork. She'll call you about signatures. Just standard stuff." "Of course," I said. He kissed my cheek before leaving. "Don't worry so much." That was his favorite line. I waited until the door closed before whispering, "Maybe you should." That night, I went through my old box of receipts, documents, and letters. I found the papers from years ago, the ones tied to the cooperative housing group and the textile venture I'd joined in the early 2000s. I had nearly forgotten about them, but they were still in my maiden name, Regina Evans. And for the first time since losing everything to that zero balance, I smiled. Not out of joy, out of knowing the story wasn't over. They thought they'd taken my future. They didn't know I'd built another one long before they arrived. And as for my son, he was about to learn what happens when you confuse your mother's silence for surrender. The day everything officially fell apart didn't come with thunder or shouting. It came with paperwork. I was sitting by the window, reading the newspaper, when a thick envelope slid under my door. The return address said Midstate Bank. My stomach tightened before I even opened it. Inside was a letter, polite and cold. "Your accounts have been consolidated under joint financial management. Contact your co-signer for inquiries." Co-signer. That word hit me harder than any slap. I read it 3 times before the truth sank in. My son had legally removed me from my own life. I called him immediately. He answered on speakerphone, his tone calm, distracted. "Hey, Mama. I'm in the car. What's up? What's this letter about my accounts?" He sighed. "It's just what I told you before, restructuring. Serena and I are taking care of things. You don't have to stress." "I didn't agree to that," I said, my voice shaking. "Mama, please. You're overreacting. This is for your protection. You've got to trust me." "Jeremiah, it says co-signer. You made Serena a co-owner on my accounts." He didn't answer right away. Then, with that same calm tone that once used to reassure me, he said, "We're family, aren't we? What's yours is ours." That sentence broke something inside me. I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that envelope. I heard his voice. The boy I'd carried through hunger and grief was now speaking to me like a stranger managing a client. I wanted to scream. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the lamp's reflection on the wood until morning. The next day, I went to the bank myself. The manager, a man I'd known for years, looked at me with pity before I even spoke. "Mrs. Wallace," he said quietly, "I wish you'd come sooner. Your son transferred the funds to a joint account last week. The authorization is complete. We can't reverse it without his consent." "Transferred?" "Yes, ma'am. The funds were moved into an account under his wife's name, Serena Whitman." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I felt the blood drain from my face. He kept talking, something about legal boundaries, documentation, but his words dissolved into static. My hands were trembling. Finally, I said, "So I have nothing left?" He hesitated. "On record, no, ma'am." On record. Those 2 words stayed with me. I walked home slowly, carrying nothing but that letter. I passed people talking, laughing, living, and I felt invisible. It's a strange feeling, realizing your entire life's work, decades of sweat and sacrifice, can be erased by a signature. When I got home, I sat in silence for hours. And then I did what I always did when I didn't know what else to do. I cleaned. I scrubbed the counters, the floor, the old stove that never quite shined. My body hurt, but I didn't stop. It wasn't about dirt. It was about control. It was the only thing I still had. Around midnight, I stood in my tiny kitchen, hands raw, and whispered, "You will not break me." It wasn't anger. It was something older, heavier. The quiet vow of a woman who's been through worse and lived to see another morning. 2 days later, Jeremiah showed up unannounced. He had that same practiced smile, the one that didn't reach his eyes anymore. "Mama," he said, "why'd you go to the bank?" I stared at him. "Because it's my money." He shook his head slowly, like I was a child who didn't understand simple math. "No, Mama, it was our money. I told you, Serena's organizing things. You don't need to worry about bills anymore." "Then where am I supposed to get my medicine money?" I asked. "The rent, the utilities. You'll have access," he said. "Just ask Serena." Ask Serena. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was the only way to keep from crying. He frowned. "You're being dramatic." "Dramatic," I said softly. "You took my life savings, Jeremiah." His expression hardened. "You always said it was for me. I'm just using it responsibly. You wouldn't even have this money if I hadn't pushed you to save." Those words cut deeper than anything Serena ever said. He'd rewritten history, turned my sacrifice into his achievement. Behind him, Serena appeared in the doorway. She crossed her arms, all calm confidence. "Regina will handle the expenses from now on. You can focus on relaxing." Relaxing. I'd worked every day of my adult life, and now the thief in designer heels was telling me to relax. I looked between them, my son, my flesh and blood, standing beside a woman who treated me like a problem to be managed. Something in my chest went still. I said, "You both should go." Jeremiah frowned. "Mama." I said go. He hesitated, maybe waiting for the old me to soften. But she was gone. They left. The door clicked shut. And the silence that followed was the sound of 37 years collapsing. I didn't leave my house for days. I sat by the window, watching people come and go, thinking about every step that had led me here. Grief is strange. It doesn't just come for the dead. It comes for the living, too, when love dies in front of you. I thought about Raymond, about the promises I'd made at his grave, about the tiny boy I'd carried through sleepless nights and hunger. And I realized something painful. I had built my entire life around the wrong belief, that love owed me loyalty. It doesn't. Love is a choice people make until they don't. But survival? That's not a choice. It's instinct. And mine was waking up again. A week later, I went to visit an old friend, Mrs. Daniels, who used to run the textile cooperative we'd started years ago. She was older now, slower, but when she saw me, she smiled like no time had passed. "Regina Evans," she said, using my maiden name. "Haven't heard that name in a while." I smiled faintly. "It still belongs to me." She poured tea and asked about my life. I told her the truth, that my son had taken everything. Her eyes softened, but she didn't pity me. "You remember what we used to say?" she asked. "Never depend on what others give you. Build something that can't be stolen." I nodded. She reached into her drawer and handed me an old folder. Inside were documents, records of my contributions, dividends, and investments under the cooperative's legal branch. "You never closed your account," she said. "It's small, but it's yours. And the textile group's expanding again. We could use steady hands." It wasn't much, a seed maybe, but it was something real, something mine. For the first time in weeks, I felt my heart steady. That night, I made a plan. I gathered every document, every receipt, every note I'd ever kept under the name Regina Evans. I put them in a small box and hid it beneath the loose floorboard in my bedroom. Then I wrote a list. At the top, one sentence: take nothing. Build everything again. Below it: 1. Find new housing under Evans' name. 2. Visit cooperative office. 3. Contact Raymond's old friend from the construction site. He'd once mentioned his nephew became a developer. 4. Never let Jeremiah or Serena see me coming. The last one made me smile. Days turned into weeks. I stopped calling Jeremiah. He didn't call either. I suppose guilt makes silence easier. But news travels fast in small towns. One afternoon, my neighbor, a kind woman named Lila, mentioned she'd seen Jeremiah's new car. "A Tesla," she said, impressed. "He's doing well for himself, huh?" I nodded politely. Inside, something cold flickered, not jealousy, just clarity. They were living large on what wasn't theirs. But every high lifestyle has a weak spot. Greed always spends faster than gratitude saves. I didn't have to destroy them. I just had to wait. One evening, I saw them on social media, smiling in front of a new house, captioned New Beginnings. The house was big, bright, expensive. My money built it. My sacrifices bought those bricks. I stared at that photo for a long time. Then I closed the app and whispered, "Enjoy it while it lasts." Because I knew what they didn't. You can steal money, but not wisdom. You can own a house, but not peace. And peace was something I just started to rebuild. The catastrophe wasn't losing my savings. It was realizing I'd spent 30 years believing love was a debt I could collect. It wasn't. It never was. So I stopped chasing what was gone and started counting what I still had. My hands, my mind, my name. And somewhere deep inside that calm, a small, dangerous thought began to grow. If they took everything thinking I was weak, what would happen when they find out I'm not? That's when the story truly began. Because from that moment forward, every smile I gave, every quiet word I spoke, it all had purpose. And Jeremiah, my sweet, spoiled son, had no idea that the woman he'd dismissed as helpless was already building the storm that would bring everything crashing down. It's funny how the people who betray you always think they've won. They move through the world lighter, louder, acting like the story's over, never realizing the person they stepped on has simply gone quiet, not gone away. 3 months passed after that letter from the bank. In those months, Jeremiah and Serena built their new life with my money, and I rebuilt my peace without theirs. But peace has its limits. I started working again, part-time at first. The textile cooperative had reopened with new contracts. Uniforms for local schools, custom pieces for a few boutique clients. They needed someone to oversee stitching quality. Mrs. Daniels called it consulting. I called it survival. The first paycheck felt like air after drowning. It wasn't much, but it was earned. Honest. Mine. Sometimes I'd sit in the small workshop during breaks, running my fingers over the fabric rolls. Every thread reminded me who I was before motherhood had swallowed me whole. A woman who made things, fixed things, built things with her hands. I'd almost forgotten her. Jeremiah didn't call during those months, but Serena did twice. The first time she said, "Regina, the bank sent a notice about your tax forms. I'll handle it." The second time, "We're updating your contact address to our place. Just easier for mail." Each call was short, polite, efficient, the kind of tone people use when they talk to someone beneath them. I said nothing, agreed to everything. I wanted them comfortable. Overconfidence makes mistakes easier to catch. One afternoon, I was finishing up work when Mrs. Daniels handed me an envelope. "Someone dropped this off earlier," she said. Inside was a flyer, real estate listings. At the bottom, a name I recognized, Evan Brooks. He was the same young man whose small construction loan I'd co-signed years ago when everyone else called him foolish. He'd gone on to build an entire development company. I called the number on the back. He answered immediately. "Regina Evans? You have no idea how long I've been trying to find you," he said. His voice was warm, full of the kind of gratitude that doesn't fade with time. "You saved me when I had nothing," he said. "You still have that co-signed certificate, right?" "I do," I said. "Then you also have shares in my first project." I never cashed them out because I wanted to deliver them in person. For a moment, I couldn't speak. He continued, "They've matured. You should come by the office, Miss Evans." Miss Evans, not Mrs. Wallace, not Jeremiah's mother, just me. I hung up the phone with a steady hand. The world felt different, not lighter, not safer, but wider. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, spreading out the documents. My old cooperative account, the matured shares, my new work income, small streams forming one quiet river. I was rebuilding, not to prove anything to them, but to myself. Still, every time I saw their smiling photos online, something twisted in my stomach. Not envy, justice waiting. One Saturday morning, I got an unexpected visitor. It was Serena, alone. She stood on my porch in designer sunglasses, holding a manila envelope. "Regina," she said with a smile that could cut glass, "we need your signature on a few forms. Routine stuff for the taxes." I looked at the envelope but didn't take it. "Where's Jeremiah?" "He's busy," she said. "You know how he is." I didn't answer. She continued, "Honestly, I think this will make things easier for everyone. You'll be listed as a dependent under our household now. That way we can claim you for care credit." Dependent. The word sat heavy between us. I smiled faintly. That's very thoughtful. She relaxed slightly, mistaking my calm for compliance. Leave the papers, I said. I'll sign them after I review. She hesitated, clearly not used to being told to wait. But she left them. As soon as her car pulled away, I opened the envelope. Inside were several documents, tax forms, yes, but also a power of attorney draft. It would give Jeremiah legal control over all my financial and medical decisions. My hands went cold. I folded the papers neatly, slid them back into the envelope, and placed it in a drawer. Then I called a lawyer. Not a fancy one, just someone local who'd once helped Mrs. Daniels with her business registration. When I explained the situation, the woman on the phone said quietly, "Don't sign anything else. Come in tomorrow." At the meeting, the lawyer, Ms. Avery, read through the papers carefully. Her face darkened. "If you'd signed this," she said, "they would have had full authority to liquidate any assets in your name, including property and inheritance." I nodded slowly. "So it's legal theft." She smiled faintly. "Legal until it isn't. I can help you file to protect your separate identity as Regina Evans. From now on, you'll need to separate every document from Wallace-related accounts." We spent hours filling forms, transferring ownership of the cooperative shares and my small business registration under my maiden name. When we finished, she said, "You'll be invisible to them financially. That's power." For the first time in months, I felt something like safety, fragile, but real. 2 weeks later, Jeremiah called. His voice was tense this time. "Mama, Serena said you're ignoring her messages." "I've been busy," I said. "With what?" "Living." He exhaled sharply. "You can't just go off on your own. We're trying to help you. By taking what's mine." He groaned. "Not this again. Serena's been handling the bills. Do you even know what she's done for you?" "I know exactly what she's done," I said calmly. Silence. Then, "You're being ungrateful." That word, ungrateful, made me laugh softly. "Gratitude requires kindness, Jeremiah, not control." He muttered something under his breath before hanging up. After that call, something changed. Small cracks began to appear in their perfect image. Serena called the cooperative office once, pretending to be my daughter. She wanted to confirm my employment status. The receptionist told me later, concerned. I just smiled and said, "Let her wonder." Then came rumors. Unpaid property taxes on their new house, delays on Jeremiah's business project, arguments overheard by neighbors. Money misused burns faster than it multiplies. Still, I didn't celebrate. I waited, because revenge, I'd learned, isn't about striking back. It's about timing. A month later, I received a letter from the bank, this time under my maiden name. It was confirmation of my new independent account and cooperative dividends transfer. Enclosed was a note from Ms. Avery. "They won't be able to trace this. You're officially free." I placed that letter in my keepsake box and whispered a quiet thank you. Then, out of habit, I checked Jeremiah's social media. Their smiles were gone now, replaced by vague posts about setbacks and new beginnings. Serena had deleted most of her photos. Jeremiah's business page had gone quiet. The cracks were widening. One Sunday morning, after church, I ran into Serena's mother at the market. We weren't close, but we'd exchanged pleasantries before the wedding. She looked uneasy. "Regina," she said quietly, "have you spoken to Serena lately?" "No," I said. "Why?" She hesitated, then lowered her voice. "They're in trouble. The bank's been calling about missed payments. Jeremiah took out loans under his business that he can't cover. Serena told me they're under stress." I thanked her, said nothing more. But inside I felt it, not joy, not vindication, but the faint hum of justice circling back. 2 weeks later, Jeremiah appeared at my door again. This time he looked tired. The polished confidence was gone. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes heavy. "Mama," he said softly, "we're having some financial issues. Just short term." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean you're broke?" He flinched. "It's not like that. We just need a small loan to cover some expenses. I'll pay you back as soon as." "Jeremiah," I interrupted gently, "you moved all my money into your wife's account. You told me it was for my own good. Why would I lend you money I don't have?" He looked at me, desperation flickering behind his eyes. "Please, Mama. Serena didn't mean." "Stop." I stood up, slowly, deliberately. "You took what wasn't yours and called it care. You lied to me and called it love. You don't get to ask for more." He dropped his gaze. You don't understand how hard things have been. I smiled faintly. No, Jeremiah. You don't. He left without another word. I watched him walk to his car, slower now, shoulders slumped, pride fractured. The woman who'd once begged the world for mercy now had none left to give. That night, as I sat by the window, I saw the reflection of my own face in the glass. Older, yes, but calmer, stronger. For years, I'd believed motherhood meant protecting your child from pain. Now I understood. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let them face the pain they've earned. The silence in my house no longer felt empty. It felt peaceful. But peace wasn't the end of the story. Because what was coming next, the discovery, the devastation, would break what was left of him. And in that breaking, he would finally see who I really was. And I was ready. The truth doesn't always arrive with a scream. Sometimes it slips in quietly. A whisper that changes everything. It was a Thursday when mine came. I had just finished my shift at the textile workshop when Mrs. Daniels called out, "Regina, you've got mail here." It was a brown envelope addressed to R. Wallace. I frowned. No one called me that anymore. I opened it right there at the counter. Inside were photocopies of bank statements. Not mine, but Jeremiah's. Someone had mailed them anonymously. I flipped through the pages slowly. Every transaction was dated, detailed. One line froze me. Wire transfer, Serena Whitman personal account, $178,000. Next to it, from R. Wallace Savings. My heart pounded. Page after page showed the trail. The full theft, documented, time-stamped, undeniable. Whoever sent it wanted me to know the truth. At the bottom was a sticky note, just 4 words. He signed it all. I stood there for a long time, the papers trembling in my hands. Mrs. Daniels came over. "You all right?" I nodded numbly. "I am now, because the guessing was over. The proof was real." That night, I spread the documents across my table. Each page was a piece of my life he'd taken, vacations, dinners, business expenses, even jewelry. They'd lived like royalty on a widow's years of hunger. My hands shook as I turned the pages. But what I felt wasn't just rage. It was humiliation. Not because they'd stolen, but because I'd believed they wouldn't. I thought of all the times I'd defended him, the nights I'd prayed for his success, the meals I'd skipped so he could have more. Every memory felt like a lie. I whispered, "You took my love and called it weakness." And that was the moment something inside me stopped breaking and started hardening. The next day, I went to Ms. Avery, the lawyer. I showed her the papers. She scanned them, expression tightening. "Who sent these?" "I don't know," I said. "But they're real." She nodded. "Then we can build a case. But if you want to confront them directly, wait. Make sure you have everything." "I don't want to take them to court," I said quietly. She raised an eyebrow. "Then what do you want, Regina?" I looked her in the eye. "I want him to understand what he did. I want him to feel it." She studied me for a long moment, then said, "Then gather your evidence. When the time comes, you'll know what to do." Over the next few weeks, I started collecting quietly. Copies of bank statements, screenshots of property listings, emails from the cooperative confirming my financial independence. Everything under my maiden name. Everything he couldn't touch. The pieces were coming together. Meanwhile, Jeremiah's life was unraveling faster than he could hide it. I heard from Lila that their house had been listed for sale by owner. Then rumors spread that Serena had been seen at the same bank, arguing with a teller. It wasn't hard to guess what that meant. When people live on stolen comfort, reality always comes knocking eventually. 2 weeks later, he called. "Mama," he said, his voice shaking. "Can we talk?" I agreed. He came by that evening, thinner, exhausted. He sat down at the same table where he used to do homework as a child. For a long time, he didn't speak. Then he said, "Serena left." I stayed silent. "She said I ruined everything," he continued. "The business, the house. She took the last of the money and disappeared. I didn't know she was making withdrawals." I almost laughed. "You didn't know?" He looked up, eyes desperate. "I thought we were building something together. I trusted her." Those words, "I trusted her," landed between us like a confession he didn't understand. I leaned forward. "And what did I do, Jeremiah?" He blinked. What did I do when you said you were taking care of me?" He swallowed hard. "Mama, please. I made mistakes." "No," I said quietly. "You made choices." He lowered his head into his hands. "I just wanted to make things better for us. I didn't mean." You meant exactly what you did, I said. You wanted control. And when she told you it was love, you let her use me. He looked up, eyes glistening. I thought you'd understand. I stood slowly, gathering the papers from the table. Oh, I do. That's the problem. I slid one page toward him, the bank transfer printout. He froze. His eyes darted across the numbers, his face draining of color. Where did you get this? From the truth, I said. He looked at me, stunned. You've been spying? I've been surviving. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. The silence stretched until it felt like the air itself was holding its breath. Then I said, You used my name, my savings, and my trust to build your comfort. You called it love. You let her treat me like charity. You told me to relax while you erased me. Mama, please. I'm not your safety net anymore. He reached out, but I stepped back. You need to leave. He hesitated, then whispered, Where am I supposed to go? I looked at him, my son, the boy I'd carried through hunger and hope, and said, That's something you'll have to learn on your own. He left. And this time, I didn't watch him go. That night, I cried. Not because I wanted him back, but because I finally accepted he was gone. Grief comes in waves, but that night it came like a flood. I cried for the woman I used to be, the one who believed love could fix anything. I cried for the boy I raised who had forgotten the lessons I bled to teach. And then, when the tears ran out, I sat in silence until dawn. The sun came through the window, faint and golden. And for the first time, it didn't hurt to see the light. Because the woman sitting at that table wasn't broken anymore. She was done mourning. She was ready. Days passed quietly after that. I returned to work, kept my head down. The cooperative was growing. My small savings were stable. Life was simple again. But underneath the calm, there was movement. A storm, slow and deliberate, taking shape. One evening, Mrs. Daniels pulled me aside. A man came by asking for you, she said. Said his name was Evan Brooks. He arrived minutes later, holding a folder. I've finalized the paperwork, he said. Your share's value has grown, significantly. He handed me a document with numbers that made my chest tighten. Enough to start over. Enough to build something real. I don't know what to say, I whispered. He smiled. You don't owe me words, Miss Evans. You gave me my start. This is just the return. After he left, I held that folder like it was made of glass. The woman Jeremiah had erased from the world. She was back. And soon he would see her. A week later, I received another letter, this one from the county office. It was about Jeremiah's property taxes. The home he bought with my stolen money was now under foreclosure review. I read it twice, then folded it neatly and placed it on the table. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply whispered, balance. Because life has a way of evening its own scales. That night, I took out my journal, the same one I'd started when I first became a widow. I wrote, He took my love, my money, my trust. But he cannot take my will. I will not destroy him. The world will do that on its own. I will just be here when he comes to see what's left. And I signed it not as Regina Wallace, but as Regina Evans. The woman he thought was gone. The woman who was about to rise again. The devastation was complete. Not because I'd lost everything, but because I'd finally let everything die that needed to. The mother who lived only for her son was gone. The woman who lived for herself was just being born. And when Jeremiah came back, and I knew he wouldn't find the mother who begged or the widow who waited. He'd find the storm he created. And this time, she'd be standing tall. There's a silence that comes after heartbreak. Not peaceful, not empty, just still. It's the kind of silence that makes you hear your own thoughts too clearly. That's where I lived for a while, inside that silence. After Jeremiah left that night, he didn't call again. Days turned into weeks. The phone stayed quiet. I stopped expecting it to ring. But absence doesn't erase the past, it echoes it. Every corner of my house still whispered his name. The cup he used to drink from. The old jacket he left behind years ago. The photo on the mantel. The one I couldn't bring myself to move. It all stared back at me, accusing, reminding, asking. Was it worth it? Then came the letter. A thin, official-looking envelope with my name, Regina Wallace, printed neatly across the front. Inside, a notice of eviction. The lease was being terminated. Jeremiah's name had been on the documents all along. A security measure, the landlord said. He hadn't just taken my savings. He'd taken the roof over my head. For a moment, I couldn't move. It was as if every sacrifice, every prayer, every ounce of faith I'd ever had was laughing at me. I sat on the couch, the letter trembling in my hands, and whispered, "You've really done it, haven't you?" No tears came this time. Just that same quiet calm. Because pain that deep stops hurting. It hardens. I packed my things slowly, carefully. A few clothes, the photo of Raymond, the box of documents under the floorboard. That was all I needed. When the movers came, I told them, "Take only what fits in one truck." They asked where I was going. I said, "Forward." I moved into a small room above the textile workshop. It smelled of fabric and detergent, but it was mine. No one could take it. At night, I lay awake listening to the hum of the sewing machines below. The rhythm was oddly comforting, like the heartbeat of something still alive. I had nothing left but work and will. And somehow, that was enough. Jeremiah, meanwhile, was unraveling. I heard through neighbors that he'd lost the house officially, foreclosure finalized. Serena hadn't returned. His business accounts were frozen. Lila said she'd seen him at the convenience store one night, wearing the same clothes 2 days in a row, buying instant noodles. For most people, that would have sounded like justice. For me, it just sounded like sorrow. I didn't want him destroyed. I wanted him awake. But some lessons only come through ruin. A month later, he showed up at the workshop. It was late after closing. I was finishing some alterations when I saw his reflection in the glass door. Thin, tired, hollow-eyed. "Mama," he said quietly. I didn't move. "You shouldn't be here." I didn't know where else to go. He stepped inside, the air heavy with shame. "I lost everything." "I know," I said. He looked at me, searching for sympathy. "She took all the money. Every cent." I met his eyes. "No, Jeremiah. You gave it to her." He winced, looking down. "I thought I was doing the right thing." "You thought being in control meant being safe," I said softly. "Now you see the truth. Control without love leaves you empty." He sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. "I don't know how to fix this." For the first time in years, I saw my son. Not the man who'd betrayed me, not the boy I'd spoiled, but the lost child in between. And I realized something painful. I couldn't save him anymore. I'd spent 30 years rescuing him from the world. Now the world was returning the favor, teaching him what I couldn't. The next morning, he was gone. No note, no call. Just silence again. But this time, I didn't fall apart. Instead, I cleaned the small room, brewed coffee, and went to work. Every stitch, every fold of fabric felt like a small rebellion. Proof that life went on. Mrs. Daniels noticed the change in me. "You're quieter," she said one afternoon. "I'm thinking," I replied. "About him." "About me," I said. Because for the first time in my adult life, my thoughts weren't built around Jeremiah's needs or Serena's cruelty. They were built around what I wanted. And what I wanted was simple: peace, purpose, and power. But peace doesn't come without a fight. One evening, I got a call from Ms. Avery, the lawyer. "Regina," she said, "someone's been trying to access your cooperative account again." My stomach tightened. "Who?" "Your son." I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. "He still doesn't understand." "He's desperate," she said. "But don't worry, legally he has no access. Everything under your maiden name is protected." "Thank you," I said. After the call, I sat in the dim workshop, staring at the walls. I wasn't angry. I was tired. The kind of tired that comes from realizing some people will drown even as you're offering them air. I whispered, then drown. It wasn't cruelty. It was acceptance. A few weeks later, I received another letter, this one from the local health clinic. My name was listed as Jeremiah's emergency contact. He'd been admitted for exhaustion and dehydration. I went, not because I wanted to, but because some part of me still needed to see the truth with my own eyes. When I entered the hospital room, he was sleeping. Pale. Thin. The boy I once carried now looked like a ghost of himself. The nurse whispered, "He's stable now. Just overworked, malnourished." I stood at the foot of his bed for a long time. I wanted to reach out, but I didn't. Love, I realized, doesn't always mean holding on. Sometimes it means letting go completely. When he opened his eyes and saw me, he whispered, "Mama." I nodded once. "Rest." He tried to speak, but I stopped him. "You don't have to explain. Just heal." He closed his eyes again, tears slipping down his cheeks. And I stood there quietly until the nurse asked me to leave. That night, I walked home through the cold air, my coat pulled tight. I thought of all the years I'd spent fighting for a version of motherhood that no longer fit. I thought of Raymond and how proud he would have been, not because I'd survived, but because I'd finally stopped begging the world to be fair. The truth hit me all at once. Everything I'd lost had freed me. The house, the money, even Jeremiah's love. They were weights I'd carried for decades without realizing how heavy they'd become. Now, with nothing left to prove, I felt light. Not happy. Not yet, but light. Still, the quiet doesn't last forever. A week after Jeremiah was discharged, he came to see me again. He looked better, cleaner, clearer, but still uncertain. I found a job, he said. Temporary work at a warehouse. That's good, I said. He nodded slowly. I know I can't fix what I did, but I'm trying to start over. I met his gaze. Starting over is good, Jeremiah. Just make sure this time, you build with your own hands. He nodded again, tears in his eyes. You really hate me, don't you? I shook my head. No, I just don't love the man you became. But maybe I'll learn to love the one you're becoming. He swallowed hard. I'm sorry, Mama. I didn't answer. Apologies don't erase theft. They only name it. When he left, he looked back once, like he was waiting for me to stop him. I didn't. Because this time, he needed to walk that road alone. Later that night, I wrote in my journal again. He took my money and my peace, but he cannot take my strength. I lost everything once before and built again. I can do it again. And as I closed the book, I realized that pain had done something remarkable. It had purified me. I no longer needed revenge. I no longer needed justice. All I needed was to live, loudly, fully, freely. But life has its own timing, because just when I thought I was done with them, the world was about to hand me one final test, one that would show the difference between power and peace. And when that test came, I would no longer be the woman they thought they broke. I would be the one who decided how this story ended. It's strange how healing sneaks up on you. You don't wake up one morning suddenly free from pain. It happens in fragments, small and quiet, like light slipping through cracks you didn't know were there. That's what the days started to feel like. Little slivers of light. The workshop kept me busy, but something inside me had shifted. I wasn't just sewing anymore. I was creating again. Each garment felt like a story, each stitch a piece of my strength returning to my hands. Mrs. Daniels noticed it first. You've got your glow back, she said one afternoon, handing me a cup of tea. I smiled faintly. It's not glow. It's peace. She chuckled. Same thing if you ask me. Maybe she was right. One morning, a city official came to the cooperative. He'd heard about our work from a local charity group and wanted to discuss a contract for school uniforms across 3 districts. Mrs. Daniels introduced me as her operations lead. He looked at me and said, I've seen your name before. You're the one tied to the Evans textile account, right? For a moment, I hesitated, then said proudly, Yes, that's me. It felt good to say it out loud. He smiled. You've got quite a reputation. Reliable, precise, fair. We could use that. By the end of the week, we'd sign the deal. It wasn't just income, it was independence. That night, as I locked up the workshop, I whispered, You see, Raymond? I'm still building. A few days later, I received a letter from the housing cooperative, the one I'd quietly invested in years ago. They were expanding and offering early members priority to purchase new units at cost. I stared at the letter for a long time. A new home. Not borrowed, not co-signed, not shared mine. The deposit was high, but thanks to the dividends and the new contract, I had just enough. For years, I'd saved for security. Now I realized security was something you had to claim. I called Ms. Avery, my lawyer. Draw up the paperwork, I said. Under the name Regina Evans. She paused, then smiled through the phone. I was hoping you'd say that. Moving into that small townhouse felt like stepping into sunlight after a storm. The place wasn't fancy. 2 bedrooms, modest kitchen, quiet neighborhood. But it felt like freedom. The first night there, I didn't unpack. I just stood in the empty living room and listened to the silence. Not the silence of loss this time. The silence of peace. It was the kind that says, you made it. But life, as always, had other plans. A week after I moved in, I got a call from the hospital again. Jeremiah. This time, it wasn't exhaustion. It was a workplace injury. A fall from a loading dock. Nothing fatal, but enough to shake him. The nurse said, He asked for you. I hesitated. For a long time. Then I went. He looked better than the last time, cleaner, more grounded. but his pride was gone. When he saw me, he smiled weakly. "Mama," he said softly. "You came." "I did." He nodded, eyes glistening. "I didn't think you would. I almost didn't." He tried to laugh, but winced in pain. "You probably should have stayed away." I sat down beside him. "You're still my son, Jeremiah. That hasn't changed. But the way I see you has." He swallowed hard. "I know. I keep thinking about what I did. About how I let her use me. I don't even know why I believed her." "You believed her," I said gently, "because she told you what you wanted to hear. The same thing I told you all your life. That you were special. That the world owed you ease. I gave you love, but I forgot to give you accountability." He turned away, eyes wet. "I'm sorry." "I know," I said. "But sorry doesn't build what you broke. You have to do that yourself." He looked at me again, desperate. "Do you forgive me?" I thought for a long time before answering. Forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting. I'll forgive you when I see you rebuild with your own hands. Not because I need to, but because you've earned it. He nodded slowly. "Then I'll try." And for the first time, I believed him. On the way home that night, the city was quiet. The air smelled like rain. For years, I'd thought forgiveness meant letting someone back in. Now I knew it was simply choosing not to carry them anymore. By the time I got home, I felt lighter. I made tea, sat by the window, and opened my journal. I spent years giving everything away, my money, my heart, my worth. But I kept one thing, my will. It's stronger than pain, stronger than betrayal. I will live in peace, not pity. I closed the book and looked around my little house. The lamp's glow was soft, the air still. It was mine, all of it. A week later, Ms. Avery visited to finalize the title transfer. When she handed me the ownership deed, I almost couldn't breathe. "Congratulations, Miss Evans," she said. "You're officially a homeowner." I ran my fingers over the paper, smiling. "You know," I said softly, "this isn't just a house. It's a promise kept." She nodded. "To yourself." "Yes," I said. Finally. Months passed quietly after that. Jeremiah kept his distance, but sometimes he'd text small updates. Got promoted. Saving again. Doing better. Each message was short, cautious, like a boy still afraid to break glass. I never ignored him. I always replied simply, "Good. Keep going." He didn't need my approval anymore. He needed his own. And I needed mine. One evening, while closing up the workshop, Mrs. Daniels came to me with an envelope. "City Council's hosting a small business award next month," she said. "They want to nominate the cooperative. You should be the one to represent us." I laughed softly. "Me? Why not you? You held this place together." I hesitated, not because I doubted myself, but because it felt strange being recognized for something I used to hide behind humility. Then I thought of everything it took to get here. The hunger, the humiliation, the betrayal. And I realized I'd spent my whole life shrinking to make others comfortable. This time I'd stand tall. "I'll do it," I said. That night, I stood in front of my mirror. Not the cracked one from the old house, but a new one hanging on a freshly painted wall. The woman looking back at me wasn't broken, bitter, or waiting for anyone to save her. She was enough, and she'd finally made her choice. Because every life has a moment that divides before and after. Before, I was a mother who gave too much. After, I became a woman who knew her worth. And that, I realized, was the real revenge. Not in what I'd lost or regained, but in who I'd become through it. I didn't need to destroy anyone to rise. I just needed to stop kneeling. The city hall smelled faintly of polish and paper. Rows of folding chairs faced a small stage, a banner overhead reading Community Achievement Awards. I'd been nominated as part of the textile cooperative, but I knew this evening was about more than a plaque. It was the closing of a circle. Mrs. Daniels squeezed my hand. "Ready?" I smiled. "I've been ready for 30 years. The room was full, small business owners, local officials, a few journalists. When my name was called, I stepped to the podium, heart steady. The host introduced me as Regina Evans, founder and operations director of the Evans Textile Collective. For a second, the sound of my own name, the one I'd reclaimed, filled the hall like music. I looked out at the crowd, at faces that had never known the woman I used to be. And then near the back, I saw him. Jeremiah. He was standing by the doorway, half hidden, thinner but upright, watching me with eyes that carried both pride and regret. Our gazes met. For the first time, there was no anger between us. Just truth. I took a breath and spoke. Some of you know me as a seamstress. Others know me as a survivor. What you don't know is that this business began from loss. The kind that strips you bare until all you have left is your will to try again. I paused, scanning the room. I was once someone who thought love could protect you from betrayal. I learned it can't. But I also learned that resilience can turn betrayal into foundation. The room was silent. I continued, voice steady. Everything we create here, every uniform, every garment, is proof that even after you're emptied, you can fill your life again with purpose. Nothing stolen can stay gone forever when you still know how to build. Applause began softly, then grew. I stepped back from the podium, heart pounding, not from nerves, but from release. For decades I'd spoken only in whispers. Tonight, the world heard me clearly. After the ceremony, people crowded around to shake my hand. I smiled, thanked them, accepted the plaque. When the crowd thinned, Jeremiah approached slowly, like a man approaching a sacred place. "Mama," he said quietly, "I didn't know." "What didn't you know?" "That you'd done all this. The business, the new house, everything. I thought you'd given up." I looked at him, truly looked. His pride had burned away, leaving something honest behind. "I gave up on being a victim," I said. "Not on living." He nodded, swallowing hard. "You built all this on your own?" "With the help of people who believed in work, not pity." He looked around the hall, at the smiling faces, the certificates, the cooperative's banner. "This is incredible. It's what happens when you stop asking permission to rise." He hesitated. "Mama, I wanted to come tonight to tell you something." "Then say it." He took a deep breath. "I paid off what debts I could. I'm starting a small repair business. Nothing big, but it's honest. I'm trying." For the first time, I smiled at him. Not out of forgiveness, but recognition. "Good. That's all life ever asks." Before he could answer, the event organizer approached. "Ms. Evans, the mayor would like a photo with you and your team." Jeremiah stepped aside. "Go ahead." I turned to him. "Stay. You should see what real building looks like." He smiled faintly, pride flickering through the guilt. The photographer lined us up. Me in the center, the plaque shining under the lights, the cooperative members around me. Flash. For a heartbeat, I thought of every version of myself that had stood in the dark waiting for a miracle. This was the miracle. Not money. Not revenge. Becoming whole again. After the ceremony, we walked outside together. The night air was cool, the street lights soft against the pavement. Jeremiah shoved his hands in his pockets. "I don't know if I'll ever make it up to you." I looked ahead. "You don't have to make it up. You just have to make it right for yourself." He nodded. "Do you ever think you'll forgive me?" "I already did," I said. "The day I stopped needing you to be the boy I raised. I let that version of you go. The rest is up to you." He wiped his eyes quickly. "I don't deserve you. Maybe not. But you're still my son. That's enough." We stood there in silence for a while, the sounds of the city fading into the night. Then he said, "You know, Serena called me last week." I tensed slightly. "What did she want?" "She wanted money. Said she's in trouble." I told her no. I looked at him, searching his face for weakness, finding none. "That's good," I said softly. "Now you understand what saying no really means." He nodded. "I learned from the best." A few days later, a journalist who'd covered the awards ceremony asked to interview me for a local feature. During the interview, she asked, "What would you say to people who've been betrayed by those they love?" I thought for a long moment. I'd tell them not to chase revenge. It keeps you chained to the person who hurt you. Instead, build something so strong they can never break you again. Let your success be the only answer they'll ever need. When the article came out, the headline read, "From Broken to Unbreakable, the woman who rebuilt her life, thread by thread." Jeremiah showed up at my door the next day holding a copy. "You sound like someone the whole world should listen to." I smiled. Maybe they're finally listening, because I finally spoke. Weeks turned into months. Jeremiah kept his job, saved, stayed consistent. The warehouse promoted him to supervisor. Sometimes he'd stop by with groceries, always careful not to overstep. The distance between us softened. Not the way it used to be, but something new, balanced. One afternoon, he came to visit and stood in my small garden. "You really did it, Mama," he said. "You turned ashes into something beautiful." I smiled. "That's what women like me do. We don't burn, we bloom." He nodded. "You know, Serena used to say you were too quiet. She said silence meant weakness." I met his eyes. "Silence is power, Jeremiah." You just have to know how to use it. The truth had been told, the balance restored. But the story wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about reclamation of name, dignity, and peace. And as I stood on my porch that evening, the sun setting behind the rooftops, I realized something simple and profound. He had taken my money. He had taken my trust. But in doing so, he had given me back myself. And that was worth more than everything he ever stole. When he left that night, Jeremiah turned at the gate. "Mama." "Yes." He smiled, small, genuine, like the boy I once knew. "Thank you for not giving up on me." I nodded. "Thank you for finally standing on your own." He walked away into the twilight. And I stood there, the air warm against my skin, the sound of the evening settling like peace. The woman I once was broken, silent, afraid, was gone. In her place stood someone unshakable. Because sometimes the loudest revenge isn't shouting. It's living well enough that they have to hear your peace echo without them. 6 months after the awards ceremony, the air in my life felt different. Still, balanced. The chaos that used to hang over me, worry, guilt, longing, had faded into something quieter. Something like peace. The days followed their own rhythm now. Mornings began with sunlight in my kitchen and the smell of coffee drifting through the open window. Evenings ended with soft music and the hum of the sewing machines downstairs. For the first time in decades, I was living for myself. The textile cooperative had grown. The school uniform contract expanded to neighboring districts, and local stores began ordering from us directly. I'd hired 2 new seamstresses, both single mothers trying to rebuild their lives. Watching them reminded me of myself years ago, scared, tired, determined. I told them, "Never let anyone tell you starting over means you failed. It just means you're brave enough to try again." They smiled, nodded, and kept stitching. Some days, I'd pause in the doorway, watching them work, hearing the rhythm of thread and fabric. The sound was comforting, proof that something I built out of pain had turned into purpose. Jeremiah visited regularly now, not out of guilt, but respect. He'd gotten his own small apartment, nothing fancy, but clean and stable. He'd even started helping out at a community center on weekends, teaching young men about budgeting and accountability. When he told me, I raised an eyebrow. "Teaching about money, are you?" He smiled sheepishly. "Guess I learned from the hardest class." I laughed, not bitterly but freely. "Well, if you're going to use my lessons, at least teach them right." He nodded. "I am, Mama. This time, I'm doing it right." And for the first time, I believed he would. One Sunday afternoon, we sat on my porch drinking lemonade. The sun was soft, the wind warm. He glanced around the yard. The flowers, the tidy fence, the hum of life around us. "You really made this place yours," he said. "I did," I said simply. He was quiet for a moment, then added, "I never realized how strong you were." I smiled faintly. "You didn't need to. You just needed to remember where you came from." He nodded, staring out at the sky. "Sometimes I wish I could start over completely." "You already have," I said. "The difference is, this time, you're doing it with truth instead of pride." He took a deep breath. "You really forgive me, don't you?" I looked at him. Not the boy I raised, not the man who betrayed me, but the person he'd finally become. "Yes," I said, "because forgiveness isn't for you. It's for me. I'm tired of carrying pain that doesn't belong to me anymore." He reached over and took my hand gently. "Thank you." I didn't pull away. "Just make it mean something." He smiled. "I will." That evening, after he left, I sat by the window and looked at the horizon. The sky was painted gold and violet. The same colors it had been the night I'd found out everything was gone. But now, instead of dread, I felt peace. Life had taken everything from me once, and I had given it permission. This time, I'd built a life that answered to no one but me. And I realized something simple. What Jeremiah had taken wasn't my loss. It was my liberation. Because it forced me to remember the woman I was before the world told me I needed saving. Weeks later, the cooperative hosted a small community event, a sewing workshop for young girls from low-income families. I stood at the front, watching them laugh and work, their tiny hands clumsy but eager. One girl, no more than 12, looked up at me and asked, "Miss Regina, how do you keep going when people hurt you?" I thought for a moment, then said, "You keep going because stopping won't change what happened. But building something new, that's how you change what comes next." She nodded, eyes wide. "You sound like my grandma." I smiled. "Then your grandma must be wise." Later that night, I walked home under the streetlights, the air cool against my skin. I passed the bank, the same one where I'd once heard the words that shattered my world. Your balance is 0. I stopped for a moment outside the glass doors. Inside, everything looked the same counters, the same sterile smell. But I was not the same woman. That woman had believed her worth was measured by what she had saved. This one knew her worth was measured by what she'd survived. I whispered, 0 doesn't scare me anymore. Then I kept walking. The following week, a letter arrived. This one addressed to Regina Evans from the local business bureau. Inside was an invitation. The cooperative had been nominated for a Regional Excellence Award. I laughed quietly, setting the letter on the table. From the same hands that once scrubbed diner floors and sewed until midnight, recognition. Not as a mother, not as a widow, not as a victim, as a creator. A few days later, I visited the cemetery where Raymond was buried. The grass was green, the sky wide and blue. I placed fresh flowers on his grave and said softly, "You'd be proud of him, Ray. He fell, but he's standing again." I paused, smiling through tears. And me? I finally stopped surviving. I started living. A breeze moved through the trees, gentle and warm. I closed my eyes and let it pass through me. That night, I sat in my living room, my own house, my own peace, and opened my journal one last time. I used to think the worst day of my life was the day my son took everything. But now I see it was the day I got everything back. Not the money, but the truth. The truth that I was never powerless, only quiet. The truth that strength doesn't roar. It breathes, it builds, it endures. I turned the page and wrote one final line. Never mistake gentleness for weakness. The woman who built everything from nothing can rebuild again. Without you, if she must. I closed the journal and set it on the table beside my plaque. The clock ticked softly, steady, patient. Outside, the streetlights flickered, and somewhere in the distance, I heard laughter. Life continuing. Before bed, I checked my phone. A new message from Jeremiah. Good news. I've been approved for a small business grant. Starting a repair shop next month. Called it Restoration Works. I smiled. Restoration Works. Maybe he was finally living the lesson I'd bled to teach him. I typed back, proud of you. Keep going. He replied, always. Night, Mama. I set the phone down and turned off the light. For the first time in a long time, I didn't dream of loss. I dreamed of the morning, of the sound of sewing machines, of sunlight on new fabric, of laughter in the workshop. Because that's what healing sounds like. In life, people will take from you time, trust, love, money. But what they can never take is the will to start again. And if you can turn heartbreak into purpose, loss into legacy, and betrayal into wisdom, then you haven't been destroyed. You've been remade.